All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. So, today we are going to be looking at the arts during the Romantic era. Again, a little something about me. I do love art. I love music. I love, um, paintings and things like that. So this part is a really interesting part in the whole world history is that some of the best music, literature, poetry, artwork comes from this era. From my humble opinion, some of the best comes from this time. So I wanted to share this with you guys and give you a little taste of what this stuff was. Okay. So the objective today, we're going to analyze what makes Ludwig von Beethoven unique. I forgot to put that word on there. Then we're going to examine the difference between romantic and realism artwork. Okay, and then we're going to create an argument on whether we would know about germs if not for Louis Pasteur. We're going to talk about two particular scientists who changed the world. Really, one of them saved millions upon billions, and another one, some of the things he theorized and claims is still refuted and argued about to this day. Now, thing is, it's not um, by complete scientists. There are some scientists who say no, he's kind of wrong, but overwhelmingly, a lot of scientists say he was right, and then you have people who, based off faith, say no. So we'll get to that in a second. Okay, so just hold on that. So here is your warm-up picture. The first question asks you, what do you think this guy is? And what do you think he does? Okay, so um, if you know who it is, awesome, write it down. If you know who he is, you know what kind of job he has. If you have no idea who this is, you're like, I don't know, write that down. I don't know who he is, but take a guess at what kind of job he has. Okay, analyze the picture and try to figure out what kind of job do you think he had. You know, the second question. Hold on one second. The second question is, what disability or impairment do you think this man had? Because he did have one. He wasn't born with it, but as time went on, he developed an impairment or slash disability. So, what do you think it is? What would you guess? Okay, so is it anywhere from like um, autism, dyslexia, you know, uh, is it something like blindness, deafness, couldn't speak? I mean, what do you think? What do you think? Do you think he was born with like no feet? I mean, tell me what do you think? Okay, take a wild guess. All right. So pause the video, write your responses down. Okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So during this time, like I said, there was a large enhancement in music, art, and literature. Um, Again, a lot of people who are into history and some of that, who are into art history, they'll tell you, yeah, it was a big time. Was it the greatest expansion in art, music, and literature? Probably not, but it was still pretty significant boom during this time. Now, in this era, it became known as the Romantic and Realism era. Artists like Eugene Delacroix, he was a very influential Romantic artist. Now, in his paintings, he basically had two major characteristics in it. One was a fascination with the exotic, a lot of action and overly dramatic things, going on. So, like this guy right here, if you can see, he's tied up and he's like reaching out for the light type of thing, and um, the other guy's kind of just to the side, just I don't want any part of that. Let me be type of thing. The other is the passion of color. So if you look at that, the kind of goldish color in the middle, there's variations of it along the guy's arm, his face, the cloth, the behind the cloth, and the shadow. So like one color of like gold has a variations of it, variation, lightness, darkness, mixture of other colors with it, but it still maintains that goldish look. You know, he once said a painting should be a feast for the eye. So in other words, I mean, your eye should just be like just really analyzing it, looking at it, things like that. Um, I'm sure some of you guys have done this before. You just didn't know it. So a great example would be like if you're sitting in your car, when a train goes by, and you're just looking at like the graffiti, the tagging, and you're like, "Oh, that's cool. That's cool. Uh, no, that sucks. No, that's awesome." You are analyzing and critiquing art. And some of those ones that are really, really good, you're like, "Oh man, that's a good one." That's feasting your eyes. You're just, wow, that's really good, you know. So that's what he's saying. Now his work was deep in variation of color, like I said, in different shades of it. Now the difference between romantic and realism art is, there is a difference. Romantic art, stuff about the common man. Strong emotional feelings, things like that. Use of nature, celebrates individualism, uses imagination, really gives it the wow type of thing. So like this picture right here, um, it's at a jail, is it a dungeon, is it someone under someone's house, are they being kept under arrest, you know, were they kidnapped, held for ransom? And you just don't know because you just mind just goes, you know. Yeah, there's no definitive answer. Realism, on the other hand, has realistic characters, realistic setting. People are doing things, that ordinary people do. Nobody's, you know, yearning for that free light and air and things like that. No, they're just I'm feeding birds. I'm playing with my son, daughter, niece, nephew, whatever. Things like that. Character development, a growth in a sense. And depicts social class. So it doesn't show just like the ultra rich, just laying around doing this, that. No, people working, playing, got off of work and then they just want to, you know, watch TV, or a maybe barbecue, things like that. So for question number one, it's asking you, what kind of painting is this? Is this romantic or realism? Okay, so you may want to go back to those last two questions, which broke down which one is realism, what is romantic, and tell me which one is this? Is this realism or romantic, and why? Okay, so don't just put romantic, realism. No, no, no. Explain to me how you know that using the notes you just took. Okay, so pause the video, write your response because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, when it came to music, there was no one as influential as Ludwig von Beethoven. That's the guy who was in the warm-up picture, which is this picture right here. He's really credited for bringing two types of music together and just making them smooth as silk when they're together. And that's classical and romantic music. Okay. Um, Arguments have been made that he was such a rare genius when it comes to music that it's difficult to actually say, is his music classical or is it romantic? It's kind of safer to say it's both, you know, or it's a new variation of it. Because again, it's most musicians you can tell, oh, that's classical. That's like Mozart, Bach, things like that. And then you got other romantic music composers, and you're like, oh yeah, that's the romantic era. But Beethoven was able to blend them so well together that you cannot tell the difference. Now, his early work was definitely classical. Again, he was trained that way in the classical music. But by his third symphony, it had the hints of romanticism with the add of a little dramaticness to kind of bring up the umph in the music. Excuse me. Now, at one point, Beethoven did go to Vienna to try to learn from one of his idols, which was Mozart, uh, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. He went to go try to find him and learn. Thing is, he didn't. Now, the thing is, we don't know if they actually met and Mozart said no, or if Beethoven never found them or they never met each other. That part we don't know, you know. So that's where things were, and history is kind of like muddled. But the thing is, as years went on, Beethoven started losing his hearing. He couldn't hear the music, but yet he could, in his mind hear this is what a cello sounds like, with this note. This is what this sounds like. What they use in writing the operas. That this person's voice would sound like this, should sound like this. And he'd write and it was all in his head. He didn't have to hear it himself. And some people say, oh, he could feel the vibration. He wouldn't even need that. The guy was such a musical genius. He could just, okay, that's like C minor, and write it out. Okay. So for this warm up, it says, after hearing a song, tell me what you think about it and what comes to your mind as you hear it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to play two of Mozart, sorry about that, two of Beethoven's songs. One of them, we'll play for a minute, okay, and then right after I'm gonna say a little something for like 10 seconds or whatever, and then we'll go to the next song for like a minute. What I want you to do is hear the first song, okay, clear your mind. A lot of students in class were like closing their eyes and trying to visualize something, some didn't, you know. So I would recommend that you honestly do let the music play, close your eyes, and just listen. Okay. I just want to say this too before we begin. I don't own the rights to this music. Okay. I'm just borrowing this from YouTube to help you guys with this particular question. So this song is called Moonlight Sonata. Okay. So again, close your eyes and listen to this music. All right, so that was 1 minute of that song. So if something came into your mind and you're like, okay, that's a good one, write something about it right now. But if nothing came to your mind, you may want to listen to this one. Again, close your eyes for 1 minute. I'll play the music and you just listen. And again, try to clear your mind, okay? right, so that was a minute from that particular song. So, again, after hearing the song of either one, what did you think about? What came to your mind? Did something visually come to your head? If so, what was it? Okay. So write your response. Um, okay, because we're moving on in three, two, one. Now, one of the greatest writers to come from this era was this guy named William Blake. He was not only a poet, he was also a painter. This picture you see right here is one of his most famous. It's called The Red Dragon and the Lady in the Fire, or The Lady in the Sun. My bad. Lady in the Sun. Um, they made a movie called The Red Dragon, and they used this painting as the uh, kind of like a plot point to the movie. Okay. Now, both his literature and poetry was definitely romanticism. Definitely, no doubt about it. His poems, one of the thing called the Songs of Innocence, and the other one called the Songs of Experience, were truly captivating, especially at that time. And it was considered like a masterpiece of poetry. Um, no, he wasn't the only person who really came up during this time. Sir Walter Scott, he wrote this book called Ivanhoe. Mary Shelley wrote this little book that you may have heard about, maybe even seen the movies, called Frankenstein. And another man from the United States wrote a really, really interesting poem. His name was Edgar Allan Poe, and he wrote The Raven. So some of these people you may have heard of, or you may have heard their poem or stories. But yeah, okay. So question number 3. How do you interpret this small part of Poems Aguirs of Innocence by William Blake? Okay. It says on here, to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. A robin redbreast in the cage puts all of heaven in a rage. Okay. Now, some students in class they really needed help with this, and if you are one of those students who are like, now that I said it, you're like, what in the world was that? What is that saying? I don't get that. Don't you're having trouble? Break it down. Break it down like to see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wildflower. Take those two lines and basically break it down. What is this guy, William Blake, trying to say? To see a world in a grain of sand. Think about grain of sands. How big is that? And a heaven and a wild flower. Well, what about flowers? You know, the flowers that grow out in the, you know, out in the open and, in the wild, you know. The last two lines, a robin redbreast in a cage puts all of heaven in a rage. You know, so a robin is a bird, you know, and think about that. A bird in a cage puts all of heaven in a rage. Why would if you want to go heaven, like literally heaven, or you want to go like he means like God, why would God be mad about a bird in a cage? You know, so break it down. Tell me what you think, okay? And again, putting I don't know, I don't get it, that's not going to work, guys. You need to actually take a minute and really think about this. Break it down, okay? So go ahead. Okay, we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So when it comes to science, there was two major heavyweight people at this time. This guy in the picture right there, that is Louis Pasteur. He proposed this thing called the germ theory. And as you guys know, we know about germs now, and it's been such an important thing in modern medicine practice. You know, doctors now wash their hands before going in surgery and things like that. But back then, he was like, hey, there's these little things in your hand when you cough, sneeze, scratch this or that. There's these things called germs on you. And when you touch things and you put things in your mouth, wipe it on your eyes, dig in your ear, touch a cut, you're transferring those germs to those things. And a lot of people are like, what are you talking about? Tiny things we can't see. Oh, how convenient. We can't see it. But now we know it's true. So if COVID has taught us anything, is that yes, this germ theory, it is true. Okay. The other really important thing, the life saving thing that he did was called pasteurization. It's the sanitation or the cleansing of liquids such as milk and wine. People died from drinking raw milk. Um, Abraham Lincoln's real mom, his biological mom, died from milk, bad milk, milk poisoning. And, because of Pasteur, now we can drink milk, without fear of, hey, might die from this, you know. The next guy who changed things was a guy named Charles Darwin. He was a scientist who promoted the idea that humans are material beings who were part of the natural world. Now, what really, really catapulted him into the spotlight was in 1859. He wrote a book called The Origins of Species by Needs and Natural Selection. In that book, he basically said that each species of plant and animals evolved over a long period of time from earlier forms of life. So he's saying that nothing just like popped up. Everything came from something else, and it just took time for it to grow, evolve, and things like that. So, like I said in class, his thing would be like this. Let's say you get a bunch of squirrels, right? You put half on this side of the world, right? This half, let's say it's always hot, near the equator. So they're not going to be having as much fur because, again, they're going to be hot. They need to, stay cool. So they won't have as much fur. They might be running around a lot faster, to get the shade, things like that. So, you know, uh, hide away from predators, right? Whereas this side is, let's say, the north, the cold. They would have thicker fur. They could probably have better insulation, bigger cheeks, so they can keep food in. Keep them warm, and when the winter comes, they can have food stored in them and energy stored in fats, so that they can live. He's saying that's what they all came from the same group originally, but then they got separated and they changed to their environment. That's what Darwin was saying. So here is my next question for you. Do you think if Louis Pasteur hadn't come up with the germ theory, that we would know about germs and how disease spread today? Do you think so? Or do you think nobody would have thought about it, nobody would have investigated, or do you think somebody by now would have thought, like, well, why is disease spreading and things like that? So what do you think? Do you think that without him we would be completely lost and ignorant about that kind of stuff? Or do you think, no, somewhere along the line somebody would have uh, come up with, discovered it too? Tell me what you think. Okay. So the writing prompt's on the bottom, so go ahead and use that. Pause the video because we're moving on in 3, 2, 1. All right, so here is your exit ticket question. You can answer one of these two questions, okay? Remember, just answer one of them. Do you think modern music is in any way influenced by classical/romantic music? What do you think? Why or why not? Okay, so people like, your guys' musicians nowadays, either whether it's hip hop, country, metal, things like that. Do you think they are at all in any way influenced by people like Beethoven, Mozart, Bach, Tchaikovsky, and all those guys? Okay. The second question said, and explain why. The second question says, do you think Darwin is right about that? Is that species evolved over a long period of time and from earlier forms of life? So if you say yes, explain why. If you say no, explain why. Okay. So write your responses. Okay. Once you are finished, guys, you are done with this lesson. Hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you truly, truly enjoyed this lesson. I enjoyed teaching it. Okay. So you guys, you take care, you be safe, and I'll see you guys later. Okay.